Pre-recording.
Welcome to the workshop of the Captiva Erosion Prevention District on this Thursday, April 21st, 2022 at 1 p.m. This workshop will now come to order. Administrative Director, please call the roll.
Commissioner Laird is asked to be excused and we'll mark her as so, but Chairman Sylvia,
Here.
Vice Chairman Maville,
Here.
Treasurer Pyle,
Here.
Commissioner Walter.
Here.
We all know the apportionment part of our beach renourishment project is coming up fast, and we need to be on top of things to make sure it is done properly and on time. I would like to turn it over to the Director of Operations, Mr. Munt, with the presentation to recap what was voted on last August. Director of Operations, Munt, the floor is yours.
Thank you. James, if you've got that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it on the right one. This dang bar is getting in the way here.
Okay, next slide. This is just the beach nourishment apportionment presentation. And the project description, just for a final number or final tally, we ended up placing 806,270 cubic yards of sand, along with 350,000 dune plantings in this project. It was completed and is expected to last 8 to 10 years. Next slide. One of the first items associated with this that we need to really dig into is the costs. Some of these costs are still being finalized, but we have a pretty good handle on where we stand as far as the total cost. I'm trying to get this thing out of my way real quick. The items up at the top are the items directly associated with the nourishment that were provided through the bid from Great Lakes Dock and Dredge. The items below are the subsequent costs associated with this. Most of them have been finalized, but if you see the far right column show items that we still have yet to pay out, such as the post-construction sea turtle monitoring and the dune fencing that we have not paid yet. Okay, so we're looking projected just under $20 million for the project. We can go to the next slide. So now the slide that's going to be near and dear to everybody's heart is the funding and how we're paying for this thing. You can see that $19.9 million translated over to the total cost of the project. The numbers up top, I've conferred with our engineer, who's been really wonderful in helping us prepare this. Erica, she's on the call. We have $1 million in funding from the FDEP for PW 361, 50,000 from the FDEM. This is a direct administrative cost for Hurricane Irma, as well as $250,000 from what's going to be LE4 from Irma as well. And then a little over $6 million from FDEP in association with Agreement 21 LE1. So with those costs coming off the top, I've been given a vote of confidence on these numbers. There's about $12.5 million remaining before the county's contribution. This is going to be based off of a percentage scale of 21.07%. As you can see, the breakdown of the county's recreational portion is a little over 3.7 million. County storm damage is about 94,000, and then the additional $1 million that Chairman Ruane from the Board of County Commissioners nominated for a project. So the county's total share is at $4.8 million. Now I'd like to take a minute to stop here because, as has been the subject of previous meetings, we've been in talks with Dr. Strong to acquire additional numbers to potentially increase our recreational benefit percentage and subsequently allow us to go back to the county to request more funding for this. So if, I'm not sure if Dr. Strong has made it into the call at this time. I see the 561 number. Dr. Strong, can you hear me?
You got to join him as a panelist.
I pressed the allow to talk. You can't have a phone number as a panelist.
Sorry.
Dr. Strong, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Hello.
So Dr. Strong's been kind enough to meet with myself, Jennifer, and our chairman to discuss where we're going with this. So I was hoping if you could give us a quick update as to the numbers you've acquired and any progress we're making towards adjusting those benefit percentages.
I don't know exactly, what your numbers represent, but we've been looking at ways of increasing the county contribution by increasing the amount of recreational benefits that were used in the apportionment plan. Not to change the apportionment plan, but to seek a greater amount of county funding, because the county begins funding process by taking the recreational benefits in the apportionment plan as its starting point. Okay, and then manipulating from there to get their contribution. And we've been looking at two different types of adjustments. One was an adjustment because of the red tide that we encountered when we were doing the survey in 2018, and in particular in the summer of 2018. We surveyed people in the winter and in the summer, and the red tide was a factor in lowering the beach use in the summer. And we got data from the hotels on Captiva to show what had happened to their occupancy during the summer, and we initially made an adjustment for that. Well, actually, no, we additionally made an adjustment using the TDC data on occupancy in hotels, and then we made an adjustment because we got Captiva specific hotel data, which we used. Now, since then, we have received occupancy data from Royal Dutch Shell, sorry, not Royal Dutch, just Royal Shell, and from American Realty Group on the occupancy, the equivalent notion of occupancy for vacation rentals, because there's quite a bit of vacation rentals now going on in the island. And they show, and we've been basically arguing that although 2018 in general was a good year, and might have been, and we can make an adjustment for the red tide, but we actually think now that because of developments that have occurred since 2018, and since the project has been completed, that you had a substantial decline in occupancy because of COVID, when there was a lockdown period. But then more recently, you had the vaccines developed, and you had kind of a snapback of people who were unable to go to the beach during the COVID period. And now they're, the numbers are quite high. And the recreational benefits are supposed to be an estimate of the average experience on Captiva during the life of the project. That is, after the project is completed or was completed, which was 2021, I gather, and between that point and the time when the next renourishment is scheduled to be repeated. And we think that we can make the argument that there will be a higher level of beach use in Captiva during that window, which can be maybe 8 years or more, a little more even, because of the snapback from the COVID-19, which will gradually fade, probably. but the economy is very strong. You know, the national economy is very strong. So we expect to see a higher average recreational benefit occurring during the renourishment project. And so we're
Dr.
trying to use the data. Yeah,
This is.
we're trying to use the data from the vacation rental market.
The last time we talked, you had indicated to Dan and I that you needed the data from Royal Shell and American Realty Group. Do we now have that data?
Yes, it came in, I guess, yesterday afternoon, and I haven't had a chance to work on it yet. But yes, we did get the data.
Start to do the calculations with Dan, is that correct?
Yes, it will have to be somewhat, creative with the data to figure out how to deal with, for example, the problem that I think it's Royal Dutch Shell changed their methodology for computing occupancy at the end of 2018, so that the data that occurs from 2019 forward is not consistent with the data they had for 2018. American Realty doesn't have that problem, but American Realty had not given us any data, much beyond 2019, and they have now, I believe, given us data up through 2021 and even a little bit of 2022 data.
So can we say that perhaps by next Thursday, we will have the analysis and we can talk about it in another workshop?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Thank you. Excellent.
This is Renee. Hi, Dr.
Road
Hi.
Commissioner.
Can you continue? Because I want to understand the distinction between your quantitative analysis and your qualitative analysis. Because could you explain to everyone, because we have a brand new board and a brand new staff that have really never been involved in this. And as you know, you and I go back to 1998. So could you just give an explanation how you ascertain and your data for the recreational benefits to the benefit of everyone? If you're not,
well, I mean, are you talking about the surveys we do? Because that's not what's at issue at this point. We do a survey, and we estimate the number of users of the beach in both the winter season and the summer season. And we also estimate the average value the users place on their visit to the beach. And then we get like the value of the beach from that. And then what the project does is it increases the size of the beach. So we calculate the value of the beach per square foot. And then we look at the increased square footage on the beach after the project is built. And it's the increase over what the beach would have been like that is the recreational benefit, the dollar number.
So is it, so that's qualitative, is it not? It's not quantitative.
Well, we come out with specific numbers. I don't know. I mean, we're not saying it's just increasing the value of the beach. We're coming out with actual estimates of the increase.
Well, it's based on the value. See, what we're trying to understand is the recreational benefits are, let me put it in a reverse way. The past 2 years, the beaches have never been more populated. And I've been on this island on a daily basis for 36 years now. And I know that because of COVID, rentals are off the charts with private homes because people don't want to be in a hotel. They want to be in a private place where they're more protected. So consequently, 20 and 21 was, packed. And I don't speak for my properties. I speak for my friends' properties, for agents. And as you know, I'm pretty well connected on the island, and I get a good here, if you will, on what the occupancy has been. So that's why Dr. Sylvia was asking if you actually saw the data, because it's much more occupied. So thus there should be more recreational benefits. Thus we should get a much better number, because we need the money. And I know you're trying to help, but I just wanted to point out what you just said. So if you could, if you don't mind, just continue what you were about to explain.
Yeah, I mean, we don't use, you know, Renee, we don't use the data between the time we did the survey and the time the beach is built. The recreation benefits that we make a projection in 2018 of what we believe will be the average level of recreational benefits in the 8 years or whatever it is between the time the project is built and the time that the project is you know, that the next renourishment occurs.
Right.
And so we're making a projection, and the projection is based on the data that we collected in 2018. Now, the occupancy numbers I've seen from, I believe, which was Royal Shell, but I'm not sure because I don't have the stuff open right in front of me, did show a very big decline in occupancy as a result of the COVID lockdown.
That was
And
during.
these were vacation, and
there
these
was-
are their vacation rentals numbers, you know.
It was a 3-month period that you could not rent. And then right after that, you couldn't get a place. See, where Captivans are frustrated is that your process is you use FGCU interns to interview people on the beach, correct?
My process interviews people on the beach. Is that what you said? That is correct, if that's what you said, yeah.
Yeah, right? So in 2018, the only people that could have interviewed were dead fish. So it was kind of a.
During the COVID lockdown. Oh, no, we did interview in August, and there were some days when there were very few people on the beach, and when there were a lot of dead fish. But that was not true of every day that we interviewed in the summer.
So let me ask Dr. Strong just one quick question, and Dan, is the methodology that you are doing now consistent with what Lee County expects? Yes or no?
I would say yes.
It's my understanding of what they expect. Yes.
Okay. Second, is there any public comments? Because I know Dan has to leave in a few minutes.
I think Al Shuley wanted to talk.
Got him?
Yeah, I just said it loud.
Hey, Al Shuley, did you have a question?
He had his hand up.
Carol Wetzel also has his hand up.
Mute him then.
Okay.
We'll go to her.
Him.
Mr. West, question? He was talking.
Your voice isn't coming through, Mr. Wetzel.
Okay. Guess we need to move on then.
If we can't hear you, please type your questions in the chat box and we'll read them out loud.
There's a chat thing right here. Yeah, because I don't.
All right.
So we just.
Chairman Sylvia, may I ask you a question while we're waiting for people?
Please.
So didn't you and Dan discover, and Dr. Strong, I don't know if he had the opportunity to explain it when you people spoke, and you both know that you're both economists, so you can speak in the same vernacular. But bottom line is, Dr. Sylvia pointed out, according to his analysis, that there was a 32% increase the year before in 2017. And perhaps for the benefit of the panel, of the people present at the meeting, Dr. Silva, you can like enlighten everyone, because I read the letter that Dan had sent on your behalf. So the message is actually for Chairman Sylvia.
Yeah, I mean, again, there is a significant increase, you're quite right, Commissioner, in 2017. And we seem to, at least on this island, be stymied by the red tide, and then, once again by COVID. So estimating the numbers are quite difficult. Again, it's very important that we have, the good data, and I think we have that now. I want to see what the analysis is, and I trust that Dan and Dr. Strong can complete this so that we can have a meeting, if maybe just a workshop next week, so we can complete this whole essay and problem and move on, because this has been too delayed as far as I'm concerned. But now we've made some progress. We've got the data. Let's do the analysis, and let's have a discussion on the analysis, as long as it meets the guidelines for Lee County, which I think is also important. We've got to make sure.
Well, Chairman, do you understand, Dr. Strong has to sign off and basically come up with, which he did when Bill and I spoke last summer, he was very willing to analyze hard data and make adjustments. But,
Right.
but bottom line is, everyone knows who has a pulse, that the occupation of the island is much stronger on the beach. There is no question, period, end of statement. And it's been the past 2 years. So with that being said, Dr. Strong has to come up with a one-pager that we can present to the county and say, due to the circumstances of red tide, et cetera, here are the new numbers, and then get them moving. But that's going to be a whole process in itself. So the timeline is very important. So my question now is Dr. Strong. Dr. Strong, just from what you're seeing, are you still going to be able to commit to redoing the numbers of the benefits, recreational benefits, based on what we're presenting to you?
And can it be done in a week? We can have a discussion on this next Thursday.
Or you guys can go back and forth so that by next week, we got a deal.
We ought to.
I mean, we don't have to, it doesn't have to be a Politburo. It can be a lot of, I know I get Dr. Strong on the phone real good. So Dr. Strong, I'm putting you on the spotlight here. What do you say?
I think we will be able to show, an additional substantial adjustment to the base level recreational benefits by next Thursday's workshop. Now that there's another economist on the board, there's lots of jokes about how economists never agree with each other, et cetera. But I will come up with what I think is a substantial adjustment on a preliminary view of the numbers, but I didn't have all the numbers that I needed. And now I think I do.
Any number you want, you just tell us what you want, and we will be in those offices or wherever you need, and you will get them right away. There's no wait here. Waiting is over. And also, unfortunately, Dr. Sylvia has heard this joke, but I have to share it with you. And what is the difference between an economist and an accountant? And the answer is, an accountant knows math. I'm sorry. Good, you're laughing. Thank you. But thank you for those kind, substantial.
If the board doesn't mind, I have just a few more minutes until I have a hard number. I just want to finish this slide. The other elephant in the room, and I apologize, I probably shouldn't have left this number in, but I put it in as a placeholder, is the amount of contribution that CEPD would like to make from its reserve and parking lot fund to the renourishment. in there right now, just as a placeholder. This is by no means board direction or have been talked about to the board at all. I just have the $1 million placeholder just in there as be, not asking for a decision today or anything like that, but I definitely want to get the conversation started for where the board is looking to contribute to this project as well.
Chairman Sylvia, I have a question, but please. you
Yes,
go.
please. Can I comment
Okay,
first?
so Dan, and also Commissioner Pyle would know, how much money do we have in reserves? And also, we've had a track record that our budget, we've never spent our budget because we saved that money for items of this nature. And I was being assumptive, but I thought we had 3 or 4 million in the reserves so that we could hit this with a number maybe 3 times as large.
Yep, you have 3.2 million in reserves.
All right, so we should talk about doing 3. We've got revenue. We are going to probably streamline our admin costs. And, you know, because again, we used to do beach nourishment with 1 person and an occasional assistant. So when the reset occurs, I don't think we're going to be going into any much larger costs. I just want to say, so Dan, we have from 0 to 3.2 million that we could throw in there, correct? With a steady stream of parking lot money that there's a clear sign that says this money goes to beach nourishment and helps the turtle.
So let me ask Treasurer Pyle if he can work up some numbers for our next board meeting in which we could actually make a decision on how much we might want to contribute. Of course, I am kind of shaky about contributing all the reserves, but certainly something more than 1 million seems reasonable, but I will leave it to Treasurer Pyle to come up with a number that he thinks is sustainable.
Well, let me comment. This is Dick. At the last renourishment, they took out, I believe, $2 million in reserves, and I think we had 5 million of reserves at the time. I'd have to check those numbers, and maybe Jennifer, you could look up that information. The other thing to keep in mind is that we have issued $18 million worth of bonds, and I'm not sure our bond counsel would feel very comfortable recommending much more than maybe 1/3 of our reserves, which I'm inclined to think the $1 million number is a good one to use, and then to keep the other 2.2 million in reserve, because we used to operate with $5 million worth of reserves, and now this would be the second time in a row the renourishment reserves have been depleted. So along with John and Sylvia, I'd be a little cautious, but I'll leave it to Jennifer and her minions to come up with a recommendation based on history.
So, administrative question, who is allowed to talk to the bond counsel?
Anyone.
Anyone, and I suggest staff. I suggest staff do that, maybe in consultation with Jason,
Good,
who's our accountant.
excellent. Let's do that.
Chairman Sylvia, just some historical reference. I wasn't around during the last beach renourishment as far as the what was given for the general fund, but I do remember that it was Commissioner Mullins at his first beach renourishment that for the very first time, because we had almost $2 million, that we designated 1.2 million. So if you want to average 1/3 last time and 2/3 the other time, we might get to half. But the point of bond counsel, this bond is backed by $2 billion worth of property. We have so much leverage on this bond. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Pyle, but it's not like this. This is like a bond dream come true. It's so well backed, so to speak. So I'm not worried about what bond counsel thinks. I mean, I don't understand why we should be, because it's like having a $10,000 equity line on your $2 million house. It's like, I don't think they're worried. Is my, so it's just,
There's always a covenant though on bonds, right? So I guess we would have to know what that covenant is in terms of the percentage or dollar amount of reserves that back up that bond. I've got to believe there's a covenant there somewhere.
could be, and a disclaimer, I'm a bond illiterate, so.
Can I make one more point before I'm already past my heart out, but I just wanted to make one more point to the board at the end of my presentation. I think the board's very familiar with the apportionment process, and I believe that Jennifer or James is able to present the rest of it. But I did want to talk about the feathering that has been brought up recently. James, if you can let me share my screen real quick.
Well, Daniel, I thought this was something I was going to show, but show the data.
Okay.
Be very
Sure, I
helpful.
just want to show the map real quick so we can look at the geography of it. Okay, is everybody able to see
Beautiful.
the map here?
Yep.
Okay, so let's start at the north end of the island real quick. One of the things that Commissioner McGill has brought up is that in the past, there has been some form of feathering to eliminate the hard transitions from zone to zone. So there's not a giant leap from one house to another. At the north end of the island, the blue properties here indicate the zone 1 properties. The orange is indicated to the blue. So you can see there's a distinct geographical difference there in the type of property. For this reason, I don't believe that the geography lends itself to a feathering at this location. And as we transition down, it's much the same with the end of zone 2 to the beginning of zone 3A. And then zone 3A ends at the S curve of Captiva Drive. And so these are directly connected to the beach. These have the road in between them. So there's, again, a distinct geographical difference between the properties. And as we continue south, we have the end of zone 3B, which is ended at the other S curve of Captiva Drive to zone 4. So there's, again, a distinct geographical difference. But where it gets a bit interesting is the transition from zone 4 to zone 5. There's not much geographical difference between the two. Just looking at the hard transition from itself, the property value of this property here is the just value. And of course, these are subject to change and will probably do so in the coming months. It's roughly $3.7 million. This property that begins zone 5 is valued at $3.16 million just value. And where that comes into play is with the current calculations. Again, the caveat I always give is subject to change with costs and grants. There is a 0.66 millage rate difference. And how that would translate into real numbers
Percentage.
is,
Percentage.
I'm sorry?
Percentage. The 0.6 millage is a 25% increase in the millage. Is it not?
Right. Well, I was going, the hard numbers, when you plug in the just values with those millage rates, the storm protection benefits of the first property would calculate out to roughly $6,500, whereas this property here would calculate out to roughly $5,200. So there's about a $1,300 difference right there. The concern, and I'll put this before the board, and ultimately the board's decision we can carry out, is that to create additional millage areas, we'd have to create additional zones to substantiate those millage that wouldn't be listed in the engineering report. So my concern is I do not want to put the board in a position where we're not following the data. And I'm not sure if maybe Ralph can speak to the legalities of making a change such as this, if it's too substantial or it's been done in the past. So there's got to be a way to do it if the board desires, but.
Well, excuse me, Daniel, is Dr. Strong still on the phone? Is he still with us?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I am.
Strong, do you remember when Steve Cutler and you got together and you called them transition zones? Steve swears that
Yes.
yes. Do you think you could talk to Dan and just explain how we feathered it? I think it was 5 homes in each direction with a 1% change so that the millage, there's not a 25% jump in the millage from property A to B. Because
It was a one mil. It was a 1 mil, not a 1%. I mean, unless you're using that in mil. I mean, in other words, one zone was say 15 mils, and then we see the engineering relates to the average characteristics within each zone.
right.
So you know that the DEP have monuments every 1,000 feet, and so the engineer collects detailed data at each monument, and things like erosion rates and other factors like that, and then they average the results for those monuments within the zone.
Right.
So one reason why we went with the transition back in 1997 or whenever was that the actual changes in adjacent properties, there's kind of a tapering between zones that's there naturally, but because the millage rate is the same in each zone, the people right on the borders are much more similar than the averages for each zone, for each of the 2 zones. So it made some sense to taper the millages. And you're right, we did about 5 properties, each way, on the difference between the upper Gold Coast and the lower Gold Coast. The lower Gold Coast was called the high erosion Gold Coast in those days. The other thing that you need to kind of consider in the back of your head is that if there is a significant difference in the millages between the zones, then the engineer will put somewhat relatively less sand in the zone with the low millage and put a lot more sand in the zone with the high millage, so that the differences will kind of even out, or will become less sharp as you go from one renourishment to the next.
But Dr. Strong, we already have our sand in, and the conundrum we face is that zone 4 and zone 5, the abutting properties, it's not just like one. It's not like 1 point millage, 1% millage. It's there was like a 25% difference in the cost. So even though homes are the same, they abut each other, but they're in different zones. One person, let's say the same value, was paying 25% more for their beach renourishment than the other one was. And so they weren't as feathered as that original beach renourishment that you and Steve Cutler did. So maybe Dan this week can actually show you our actual millage rates, and then next Thursday we can have a discussion on that, because what you're saying is that it was feathered, the entire zone was feathered a little bit. So if there was a millage,
no, just the edges of the 2 zones were feathered, and we didn't create new zones. We just feathered between the zones on the argument that the average for the zones was different at the edges.
To do now, and I disagree. We did it before, so that's why I'm saying, can you show Dan how we did it and how it can get done?
I just sent him about, as the meeting was starting, I finally found an old report where I wrote out in detail how we did it, and I sent him that.
Right.
No, and I'll review and follow up with Dr. Strong. I'm past. I've got to go. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Bye,
Dan.
Dan. Thank you.
Fabulous job, Dan. It's a fabulous job. Great.
Okay, so continuing this discussion, and again, this is my personal view, and we're just trying to understand the initial purpose of this workshop was a discussion of Dr. Strong's adjustment of the recreational benefit portion of the apportionment to meet the guidelines of Lee County. I canceled the workshop to offer Dan Strong and I enough time to analyze the data, and I trust that that will happen by Thursday. And I also caution everyone, emails can be deceptive. I received an email from a commissioner asking for a workshop to discuss a different topic, and I thought not consistent with the vote on apportionment last August, nor with the transparency of decisions expected by the citizens of Captiva. I do remember that there was a discussion some time ago with Mr. Rosen, Mr. Watzel, and Adler, and there was some kind of a special adjustment that was removed from those properties to keep this assessment as clean as possible. And I understand that sometimes the tone of an email can be confused, but I found the email somewhat unprofessional when asking for a workshop. There is too much "we have to" and bold print inconsistent with the idea of a request and collegiality. I think we need to work on that. Second, to me, there is a major inconsistency between the attitude that we must get the apportionment done by September and the sudden interjection of a brand new topic on feathering that I feel should have been brought up and voted on by last August. I think this request is a distraction and not direction, and I feel it's inconsistent with the time constraint to meet Lee County guidelines as well as the engineering designs. The beach brief of February 26th of this year clearly laid out the steps towards final apportionment. This is a process, not a panic. The apportionment will get done on time and under the proper procedures with clear transparency to Captiva citizens. The chair also objects to an email of April 19th that further asked extensive work of the staff while also acknowledging, quote, "with just a few weeks remaining," unquote. There must be some recognition that summer is approaching and several commissioners and staff as well will be away. Quite frankly, this whole feathering proposal strikes me as a last minute deal that citizens object to in Congress. The House reports a bill, the Senate committee reports out a bill, the conference committee works out the compromise, the bill hits the Senate floor, and then suddenly special language is introduced as an earmark at the last moment. And this comes across to me as exactly the situation. I cannot support any last minute scramble. This should have been worked out last year. The rush to judgment now strikes me as a backroom maneuver that renders the apportionment process suspicious of favoritism and uneven handling and transparency of the apportionment process. The process should be clear to all citizens of the Captiva, and I am certainly not comfortable with the transparency of the proposed feathering. To quote former Commissioner Mullins, the process was simply not embraced by the CEPD and the last project's apportionment methodology. Former Commissioner Mullins goes on to say in an email, "Good luck finding details in the office," and the prior executive director decimated much of the historical archives. And again, when I'm looking at this and Dr. Strong talks about 1997, sorry, we don't have any documentation on that. And the chair recommends to drop this discussion and move on to a discussion of other issues in the future. Based on the chair's view, and it is my view, there is no further discussion or work towards feathering or transition zones. And as far as I'm concerned, the issue is closed. Of course, other commissioners can make their points of view.
So can I make my rebuttal, please?
Absolutely, pal.
Thank you. So this entire board, especially you, have never been involved in a beach renourishment, ever. Staff has never been involved in a beach renourishment.
I'd like to beg to differ, Renee. I was part of the last one.
You were?
Yes.
You were on the board 9 years ago?
I got on the board right as we started the nourishment, and I was there for this part of it.
I wasn't sure, but you were just on the board. All right, so it was brought to my attention about, are you going to do transition zones and feathering? And when I spoke to past, it came to my attention. It wasn't a ploy or anything like that. If anyone knows me knows that I care about the interests of Captiva, not about the Pullet Borough that's being created now. But be as it may, I just basically said that this was used before. Dan explained why it could be of value. It doesn't take any real time. It doesn't slow the process down. It doesn't do anything. And what's really fascinating here is that we're trying to be efficient and trying to use all the past successes that were incorporated in past renourishments. So it's not some Machiavellian play like being inferred by Chairman Sylvia or whatever, who's ever influencing him in that nature. It's just merely a suggestion. It is something that of concern. It's, and it doesn't hold back anything. And as far as we will get the apportionment done, Mike Mullins, the former chairman, has said countless times, if you think you're going to get the apportionment done and it's just a matter of 1, 2, 3, you're in for a serious, serious upset. That's why I've been making sure that we understand the most important thing we can be working on is that we have our apportionment numbers locked and loaded so that when it comes time in September for Matt Caldwell's office to send the bills out, that we're on time. And right now we've had a 6-month delay because the conversation that just took place now could have taken place 3 months ago. And that I've banged on the table for 3 months saying, we got to get Dr. Strong on board because this could be a lot more money. And Dr. Strong is graciously. So the point is, Chairman Sylvia, this is your first rodeo. You're new and you're talking about things that you don't understand. And I respect that, but please don't be misled. All we're trying to do is make it a better place. And if you feel, say, look, it's a few thousand here and there, I think it's a waste of time. Now you can say that, but don't say it's some grand scheme because candidly, I don't look worse for it. I'm just trying to be helpful. And I'm the only one on the board.
Let me reply.
For this seat. None of you, not one of you. So just remember who you're talking about.
Let me reply just one point. My reading of Dan's presentation is that there was only one area where the feathering made any sense. As I understood it, there was a comment that, and I think it was geographical distinction or something, was significant. So if you're talking about that one area, then we should be able to get it done.
So
But if you're talking about all the rest of the island, no, I don't see it. Go ahead.
No, I was told by Dan, there's only 2 areas of consequence, zone 4 and 5 and zone 1 and 2. There was a big delta. And so I thought this is, you're there. Wasn't there a big?
This is Bob Walter. Can I add something?
Please.
One area or 2 areas, I think that's, up to opinion, right? So if we do 1 area, we do 2 areas, I think we're setting a precedent that could be a major issue. I'm located this part of the beach. Why am I not feathered? I'm this, I'm that. I think we have to go with the defined areas of Captiva and stay with those.
And we can, but Bob, the question is different. Is there a disparity between zone 1 and zone 2? Is there a big difference in the millage? I don't recollect. Dan said he thought there was. So there were 2 abutting areas of the 5 areas that there were 2, where they met.
Well, you could look at the past assessments and see if there was. Very simply.
Just saying what Dan said. Dan's not there anymore. And all I'm saying is the first section, and it wasn't a big deal. And it was just an add-on. And fortunately, we don't even have to do the other item that I wanted to talk about because Dr. Strong has graciously said he's going to try to do his best job possible. So, I mean, but you make a very good point, and by saying, well, is this going to confuse things? Is it going to slow up things? Is this sort of, the inference that this is some subterfuge or something like that? And it's just really, the bottom line is, Zone 5, Zone 4, there are two houses next to each other. There's a 25% difference in their costs. And as Dr. Strong said, and he worked with the original chairman who actually created the first beach renourishment. And they put together this plan. I think it was done the second time around. And then the last time with the former commissioner, and excuse me, just so you know, Mike Mullins, if you read the letter that he wrote, he was very much for it, but he didn't have the vote of the board. And that's fine. It's a democracy. But please don't, Chairman, don't infer that this is some game. I'm beyond.
But my understanding is 1 and 2 is built South Seas, is that correct?
There is. Yes.
So what would be the feathering issue there?
Dan said there was a big difference in cost between Zone 1 and Zone 2, that the millage, and I don't have the data handy, and I guess none of the staff outside of Dan can whip that up in a second and check it out, because otherwise they'd speak up.
But Commissioner Walter, this is your area.
Yeah. How about it, Bob? You know?
What? No, how would I know? if the administration doesn't have the information in front of them handy, how would I know?
Well, no, you weren't part of the meeting, so that's fair.
So in answer to sort of that question, one of the things that we approached this week as a team was looking at the map that Dan created for our website for the apportionment. And those millages are from the initial millages that we had from the property assessor's office from last year.
You put up what zone 1 and 2 are? A map, just a map?
I'm gonna pull it up right now. Hold on.
They have the beach assessment, you know, the ad valorem, not the final ad valorem, but the suggested, I always get it mixed up. Suggested millage, thank you. But not millage, it's the potential cost. We finalize it when we finalize it, but Dan set up a map. And all you have to do is if you go to Zone 1 and 2 and see where they touch each other, hit each house and see the difference in the millage. Then we have our question answered. But
I'm sorry.
only Dan saying 1 and 2, there was also a disparity. Not a light one, but it, you know, like 4 and 5, 25% is nothing to sneeze at.
That's what I'm asking. If I could see a map, I might be able to tell you right now what the difference is.
We're pulling it up right now.
Okay.
It's taking a minute to upload. Wi-Fi is very, very slow today. But if you look, what I'm trying to say is those millages have not been updated. They need to be updated. And I don't want to have to go through with Dan and help him update all that until we're for sure this is something the board wants to do, in which case, you know, we'll be happy to do it. But I just want to make sure that this is the direction you guys are going or not.
So who established the numbers?
Didn't Dan make a map that right now we can go on the map, touch
Property
it, and see what their projected cost is? We have that map. So we don't have to, Dan doesn't do anything. It's there, but you guys don't even know where it is. Dan
That's
made.
not true. That is not true, Renee. Don't say that. We do
map.
know where it is. And the problem is the property collector, the property assessor's values have to be uploaded into this map. It's not just a switch.
Even if it goes up, they go up in relationship to
Right.
Blue is
5 million.
1 and red is 2.
Maybe it's a $6 million house, but the house next.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
The blue lines there are zone 1. I can tell you right now, those are the largest single lot, most expensive homes in South Seas.
Click on that. You click on
So
one.
from a tax assessment perspective, they have much higher tax values than some of those other areas just because of size and scope of the property.
Yeah.
And Jen, just to go off of Chairman Walter's comment, Zone 1 does have the highest land value per square foot, and they have about 20% of the total land value of the island up there. And Zone 1 did receive the largest fill density pretty much out of all the projects. So if you're looking at it from the engineering perspective and the property value, they would probably have a higher percentage of millage based upon that.
But we're
Thank
not looking at the value of the value of the home. We're looking at the charge. So for example, a house in zone 1, no matter what their value is, they're charged based on the attributes of how long the sand sits there, how much sand they're getting. That's zone 1. And zone 2, according to Dan, had different metrics. And thus they paid less, or maybe they paid more, but there was a disparity to the point, just like zone 4 and zone 5.
And I assume historically it's always been there, correct?
Zone
Yeah.
4 and 5.
No,
Yeah.
1 and 2. That disparity's always been there.
Okay,
Yes,
so with that being said,
yes.
originally, before it was changed, they just feathered it a little bit. So house A in zone 1 and house B abutting zone 2 say, why am I paying 40% more? Your house is the same value as mine. Oh, you're in a different zone. You got to pay more. So that's how we worked around it. And actually, I found out that it wasn't done according to Mike, the last time.
But that's not a true statement, Renee. Those houses aren't the same value.
So every house in the
Zone 1, those houses in zone 1 are 4 times higher, more value, assessed value.
So where the line is, the houses also change as far as the.
Oh, absolutely. The lots are 3 times the size and the houses are 3 times the size in that zone.
I totally understand that part. I am not aware of zone 1 and 2. In zone 3 and 4, the houses are identical. But
See
there's
to the
a-
right?
Right there.
Yeah, so if you look up what we're showing you right now, you see the millages on the presentation we previously sent you all.
Thank
in
you.
there.
That's what we
They're
need.
all in there. And the
Okay,
value
zone 1,
is going to increase. And when it does, doesn't matter what your millage is, when the value increases, the cost goes up. So just want to point that out too.
so the millage of zone 1 is nearly 6%. The millage of zone 2 is 1.32. So if a home is worth $10 million, they're paying 5.89. And if the home in zone 2 is worth 2 million.
That has nothing to do with the CEPD. That has to do with the way the property value is assessed by the property assessor.
Yes, but the metric changes to the tune of 200% based on the millage.
Right, but we went through all this, Renee, last year when all of this got brought up, remember? And there was the big issue about, this property, Lucky Duck is worth 700,000 and you know what I mean? So what I'm trying to tell you and the public is that we don't have control over that, right? So what you all control is your millage.
We are not controlling. We have now established, which I was trying to get to, is that the millage rate of 5.89 and the millage rate of 1.32 is based on storm protection and the amount of sand that goes on there. That's what I've been trying to explain.
Yes, yes.
So in 4 and 5, there are homes that abut each other. They get the same amount of sand. But in this case, and Bob, you can answer this, the millage is different in zone 1. So the house that's the last house of zone 1 and the first property of zone 2, are you telling me that they're getting 300% less sand? The answer is no, they got the same amount of sand. I know that. So all I'm trying to explain is what they did at the beginning so people wouldn't freak out and say.
Doesn't the recreational use though, if it's a high recreational use, doesn't the millage increase that much more?
It's standard throughout the whole island, the recreational use.
I don't know, is Dr. Strong still on?
I mean, look, Aptom's on the phone. They can explain it too, but I've now established what I've been trying to say for the past 10 minutes. It has nothing to do with the value of the home. It has to do with the assessed millage of that particular section, whether you have the Taj Mahal or a shack.
Well, again, with respect, Commissioner Maville, I just feel that this whole discussion brings up a point that I made earlier. It is way too confusing to the community. This is not at all transparent, especially again, I think with respect to Commissioner Walters' area of areas 1 and 2. I just don't see it. I just don't see how we can justify anything like a feathering with respect to 1 and 2. So I would pass on that. So to me, it's just too confusing to the community.
Well, it wasn't confusing the first two renourishments. It got ignored the last one. And the one, so, you know, if you, I don't care, but don't say it's with all due respect.
Just to clarify really quickly, Commissioner Maville, what you said is it got refused in the last one. So are you saying for the first and the second, this was the methodology that was used?
Dr. Strong just said it. Was Steve,
The feathering piece. And so why didn't anyone tell us this?
well,
last-
that's a good question. Our director is new. The board is new. You know, we didn't catch it in time. No one's perfect. And Apton didn't tell us.
So we move on.
Because Apton is new. Bob wasn't there. Mike forgot to talk about it until recently. Everyone calls me, say, "You doing the feathering?" So it was an oversight. Let's just call it an oversight. No, look, and we didn't do it last time because it was voted not to do, but it was done before. And you heard Dr. Strong say, yes, of course we did. And he called it a transition zone. So all I'm doing is bringing out techniques that were done for apportionment that are not some personal subterfuge to stall this thing or whatever, which, you know, find it, you know, I'd use an obnoxious.
But Renee, you still have the same inaccuracies. If you take 4 homes in zone 2,
Yeah,
and you feathered from zone 1 to zone 2, the 6th and 7th home are going to be paying less than the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd home, but they're still in zone 2. Hence the confusion the chairman speaks of. It's just so
it sounds it,
not
but,
transparent.
well, it sounds it, but they did it the first 2 times and no one wants to hear how they did it. So that's
30
fine.
years ago.
So it's the same amount of sand that went on there. I was here 30 years ago.
I'm just saying.
Well, I'm just trying to point out, Bob, with all due respect, this is how they,
Yards of sand or more? What did you just say, Renee? You said,
we put in, the first beach renourishment was massive. I don't know the exact numbers, but it was, what was it, 1.2 million? It was even more than they put now.
okay,
So the whole thing, my point being is that these were some of the techniques that were done because there was disparity, and the chairman at the time was a problem solver. And he was the one who successfully, after 2 referendums, was able to get it passed so that we could get beach renourishment. And in that process, he understood to making people happy and you know, was very important too. And there was a disparity where house A was going to pay more than house B, but they were getting the same amount of sand. So they came up with something, and you know, we don't have to pursue it, but let's just say it's too late in the game. But this whole transparency and this negativism, I'm not going to put up with that. I'm sorry. That's bull. And there's unfortunate, I don't know what it is. And it's, you know, say that to people that are new, not to people that are been around.
Okay, it's done.
And that's an insinuation and I don't like it. And we're on record. And if you want to make insinuations, then be very careful, but at least be accurate. Thank you.
Okay, administrative update.
thank you. So just really quickly, I wanted to update you all rather than send a long email. We initiated Park Mobile. The app is working. We were out there this week, last week to check on our customers, and they all seem to be using it with ease. We did break up per our last voting board meeting, the recommendation to do a 1-hour option in addition to a 2-hour option and an all-day option. We'll be tracking that so that by May, our May voting meeting, I'll be able to give a report out on that revenue and see if we generated more. I'll also look at a comparison from last year as well, just to help with that comparison. I mean, that analysis. Effective May 3rd, Grady Scott will no longer be working at our parking lot. He was our full-time parking lot attendant. We still have Austin Sharkey, who is our part-time. So I have offered to Austin to move into that full-time, but he goes to college online, so he's not sure he'll be able to do that. So I'm just going to leave that position open for a little while, given that we're going into the slow season. The last thing, or last 2 things, TDC grant conference was yesterday. We had a meeting at TDC at 2 p.m. I sent James and Dan to follow up. The good news is that both grants that we applied for, one for capital expenditure for a larger, bigger, better, safer beach buggy was approved. And also our parking lot maintenance reimbursement that was also approved goes to, also has to be blessed by the Board of County Commission, but given that the TDC's approved it, it's looking pretty good that we'll get these grants. Lastly, I received an email yesterday from Scott Miller, who is with Earth Balance for dune plantings. I did request after our last April board meeting that we order 1,000 plantings per direction from you all. Unfortunately, he won't be able to get them to us until the end of next week. Commissioner Laird reached out to me earlier this week. Her concern, which is a valid one, is that all of the snowbirds are going back. So season is over. My concern is if I order these now, we'll have 1,000 plantings that maybe won't be used. So I wanted to get your follow-up and sort of your guidance. And if you guys are okay, I would like to pause ordering these until next season when we can really advertise it before people leave to go back up north or wherever. And that we're not going to waste, that money or those plantings. So if you all are okay with it, I would like to request that we hold off and order these next season.
I move that we would hold off.
Well, you can't move. You just have to give me
I'm just
direction.
telling you right now. Hold
Okay.
off.
Other commissioners, do you have an opinion?
Hold off, Bob Walter.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think just hold off and maybe kind of advertise it or do a publicity campaign so more people will take advantage of it next year.
Yeah, I agree. We'll put that on the marketing plan, Commissioner Pyle, so that's assigned and on the calendar. All right.
What
Jason,
about the,
Chief, enough of public comments.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
Commissioner
Commissioner
Lavelle,
Lavelle?
did you have something you wanted?
Yeah, no, I want to add in, it makes perfect sense. The only question is there are people, they're going to ask questions about the ropes and poles, about, the people that don't want them out. And Dan and I identified 5 easement areas. There might be a 6th or a 7th. So I don't know if that gets mentioned now or at the regular meeting.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is we've had walkthroughs with Commissioner Sylvia as well as you. And we are gonna compile a list spreadsheet that we'll share with all of you before the next voting meeting. And I know that you all assigned Commissioner Walter to handle the South Seas areas. So Commissioner Walter, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to ask any property owners if they wanted their ropes and poles removed or if they wanted anything added. But if you could do that in the next week or so and get us that information, we'll compile a list.
Okay, I have not asked and I have not received any requests for either.
We put up, Dan and I talked this through after our meeting. And one of the things that we thought would be much more efficient is if we had some sort of a survey. So we created a survey and had Laura post it and do a beach brief on it. We may send that survey out again because I'm trying to encourage folks to fill it out. So any residents that have reached out to me, I've sent them the survey back to ask them to fill it out. So I
You
will
can send me that. I will
Yeah,
send it to the presidents of within South Seas and have them address their homeowners.
That would be great. I'll send you the link to that. And then that gives us a much easier way to track the requests to remove or to keep.
Perfect. I'll do it today.
And Linda is leaving next week, so I need to get with Commissioner Laird and get her follow-up on her area that she was going to target. So again, once we have all that, we should get that to you a week before our voting meeting so that you all can have it to review. And that way you'll be ready to vote on it during the meeting.
Also, one more point, since you have it all sorted out with Earth Balance, you should be able to close out that bill, even though they have some supplemental work that they're going to do. That way, that's one less item to deal with to get the grants, because you have to, finish up with the bills like.
I mean, I did speak with Scott Miller about that, and he was holding off because he wanted to make sure, you know, he didn't want to necessarily charge us for additional removals. So, but I can tell him, we're just ready to move forward with the $94,500 that you all approved, correct?
Yeah, but also he said included in that 94 would be the 6 additional poles that he never put in.
Yes.
So
Yes, he's just not, we were talking about the removals, so I can tell him we want to move forward.
well, yeah, you can do it 2 ways. What I would suggest, you close out the bill now for 6,000 less, because you basically do the amount of polls. You say, look, you charged us X amount of dollars. You come to some agreement and you close them out now and just say, because I think he's going to lose money to send those people out just to do a day's worth of work. And then you use the other person to go buy some polls. Well, no, we have enough polls that people want out that have to go in somewhere else. We don't need, so I would recommend, and you know, Chairman Silver's right there, just close this guy out. And we save $5 or $6 grand. The other, because the cost, 3 guys moving poles is an hour and a half per place. So you figure it's 3 hours to take poles from one place and put it somewhere else. So we're not talking a lot of money, and that's within Chairman Sylvia just saying, hey.
Let's go. Okay, we've already voted on that amount, so it'll be less. And then if you're saying that you want to then look at bringing in Bob Johnson to put in the overflow poles, correct? You want to take the extra poles that we have and put them in and hire Bob Johnson. That was what you all said at the last meeting.
I know what you said, but now we're, you know, like any business idea, you grow it. And what we're saying now is if you want to close out, what's this guy's name, Walter, the Earth Balance?
Scott Miller.
Yeah, too many names in my world. Can we close out the bill? And look, there's 6, you haven't, you know, there's 6 that supposedly we're not paying for that you were going to put in. How about since you charged us $900 per setup, would you be willing to accept $91,000 versus the 96? And that way we close out the bill. If he says no, then say, okay, get over here and get these poles out, and put them over there. Or no, or just put in new poles, however you want to do it. But I'm just, leave them hanging, is the only point.
Yeah, I will give him a call on my.
Let's
Just
do
see
it.
And then tell the deal to, you know, Chairman Sylvia, and, you know, and just say, look, this is one way to handle it. And then with Bob Johnson, I think floated to someone $20,000 to change the poles, this and that. I don't know if that might be the need to redo all the ropes, but you know, that's another conversation that I don't want to be part of at this point. I'm just saying that if Bob Johnson is willing to go and get the poles out of people that have been contacting us that they don't need those poles, there's no easement there, it was a mistake, they pull them out, there's enough people already said, I want mine out, and we put them in the places they're needed. He could do that right away, provided he's going to do it for, you know, whatever he would charge for 3 guys for 3 hours per unit.
Right, but I think Commissioner McGill, that in the last meeting, and I'll have to check my notes, but I believe that you all needed to determine and look at the new placement, because remember, you know, just because somebody asked us to remove or add, you all still have to decide that if it makes sense, you know, because of the easement, because of the type of easement.
Well,
But we already have decided that. Dan and I have
Walter,
got both.
I looked at something, so it's 3 out of 4.
Right, but
So-
I believe in the meeting, you said you wanted to bring it back to the meeting, put it all up on the mat and vote on it.
May 7th.
Right, that's what
Done
I thought.
deal. Let's vote, May 7th, put it on the agenda.
That is the agenda.
We have a meeting
Right.
about it, but it could have been just done, but that's fine.
Okay,
All right, James, can you open it up for public comments?
Yep, just, let's see, we got, one person here, John Rosen.
Hi, this is John Rosen. First of all, I'd like to thank the commissioners and the administrative staff and the CEPD for all the hard work they've done. I have been listening to these meetings for a number of years now, focusing in on the beach renourishment and the allocation of the model that has been developed. And I agree with the commissioners that this needs to be transparent. This formula, as I'll refer to it, is very complex. It involves a number of items from surveys to estimates, assumptions, ad valorem, provided by the county. The only real constant in this that we'll have at the end of the day, the absolute number, is the amount of sand and the cost. Everything's an estimate other than those two items. And I think it's incumbent upon the administration and the commissioners, as they've discussed, to ensure that this is clear to every person that owns a home on Captiva, as well as the businesses that get assessed an amount. That being said, some of the items that were discussed have already been agreed upon previously, and there are engineering studies, if I understand correctly, that take into account certain of the items that were discussed. To change it now, in my opinion, being close to, if you put the stake in the ground as September, when the allocation will be made, muddies the waters further than already is done by just understanding how difficult to understand the model is. So in closing, there are people depending on that number that they anticipate coming. People are putting budgets together for 2023 when they expect the bill to come through so they can project their cash flows. And I appreciate all the work that's been done thus far, and I hope it continues. As far as the reserve for the bond, that should be pretty clear in the bond indenture, as John Sylvia, Commissioner, alluded to. And to lock in on a reserve number now, when you have money still coming in, and to say it's $1 million now and that's what it's going to be, I would suggest a cash flow projection be done to anticipate how much money will be available to contribute to this project. So thank you very much, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pyle, did you hear that cash flow projection?
I'll work with Jason on that, Commissioner
Good.
Pyle.
Let's do that.
It's a great idea, John. Thank you.
Yeah, he should, Jason should be able to give you an idea. And I haven't, the annual report, the audited financials for CPD through June, right? That has been released, and I'll have to review that again, but there is a section in there related to the borrowings of the CPD, and I think there's probably some specific numbers as far as what kind of reserves we have to maintain to make the bonds marketable. That's what people have to remember, is that the reason these reserves requirements are put in place is that's determinative of the valuation of the bonds. Obviously, if the reserve requirement is very low, a person borrowing would have to pay a lot higher interest rate. So we'll look into that. And but I think, as I said, I certainly think we're going to be comfortable with $1 million, but no way can we do $3.2 million.
Any other comments?
I don't see any other hands up right now.
Okay. Any final comments from the commissioners?
I'll just make one. Based on the letter you read about, what you read, I don't know if you scripted it or Jennifer scripted it for you, but I just want to point out, for 6 months, it was me driving the fact that the numbers are because of the red tide. They pushed very, very hard to get where we are today. So as far as that goes, if we were really on our game, and you've been chairman for 4 months, if we're really on our game, we would have had this discussion taking place 3 months ago, because this data is from, for a year ago, 2021 attendance and all that. But be that as it may, we have to understand that all we're trying to do together as islanders is make this a better place and make it the best deal possible. And so we're all working as, we are elected, but we are volunteers, and we're putting our time, treasure, and talent into trying to make this a better situation. So I find the comments that you made of your scripted, which you were reading, naive. And, I forgive you, but I just want to go on record that it is just so inaccurate to point out something like that when I've been the driver to get where we are now with Dr. Strong. If it wasn't for my efforts, this conversation wouldn't even taken place today. So, I just don't understand what the motivation was, or maybe where the influence was. But just, you talk about you want my institutional knowledge. Well, 4 months we've been we should have had this conversation with apportionment with Dr. Strong 4 months ago. And the only reason we're here, as I mentioned before, was not the efforts of the office getting him to the table, but because I was able to find him and bring him to the table. And then the staff was unable to get the numbers from the rental agencies, and I called them up and the information came the next day. So again, please be respectful of the people that are moving the ball forward, and don't be so influenced by whatever it is you're being influenced by, that my efforts were somehow some kind of subterfuge to create it. I mean, I'm flabbergasted. You could even write that stuff. It's like, really? Okay, fine. But I just want to go on record that I'm really disappointed that you would be influenced in that manner, because the comments are very naive.
I think the chairman started his entire presentation with, "This is my opinion."
Say what, Bob?
He started the presentation, if I remember, the words with, "This is my opinion," I believe. I may be wrong.
No, of course it's his opinion. And
You're implying that it was conspiracy theory of some kind. I'm sorry.
reading
That's
a
what I'm
letter.
gathering.
No, he's reading. Okay, listen, let's get to the chase. Who wrote the letter? You or Jennifer?
What?
Chairman, what you read today about, yes.
Oh, I wrote it.
Oh, really? You write it with Jennifer or by yourself?
No, by myself, entirely by myself.
Okay, good.
And I have seen so
Do you
much.
not know John Sylvia? I mean, the guy writes for a living.
I know, I get it. Okay, so I just want to know, and that's fine. But what I'm trying to say is that, are you aware that we're at where we are now with Dr. Strong, not because of the staff finding him, not because of discovering about the red tide, but because there was a board member that had to go in and make it happen because staff couldn't get him on the phone, couldn't get the data from the, so I'm saying, don't you add that up and say, why is this guy trying so hard to help us and yet make this comment, your opinion, that I'm trying to create some confusion with this feathering that occurred the first two. I don't get it. I'm trying to understand this perception. I just think you're better than that. That's all. That's what I'm
Fair enough. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Bob
Anybody
Walter
second?
will second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
We are done. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.